I never expected to feel lonely in retirement. In fact, I can remember years of telling my kids, someday when I'm in this house all by myself, I'm going to sleep when I want. I'm going to eat when I want. I'm going to clean when I want. I'm going to listen to music that I want. I'm going to watch TV that I want. I remember longing for days to be alone in my own house. And it is different to be alone in your home versus to feel lonely in your retirement. I started my retirement kind of with a quick start. I was in a corporate position for 35 years, same company, thousands of friends and relationships. And when I retired, I thought, well, this is going to be great. I'm going to have time on my own. And it was almost like, someone throwing a cold glass of water in your face. It was one of those where did everybody go moments. And the silence and the quietness became a bit deafening for me. I started to look around and realized, where did my friends and friendships go? And had the harsh realization that a lot of my friendships were situational. A lot of them were work friends. A lot of them were based around common goals, common missions, common visions, all around our corporate structure. I hadn't really made time for friends of my own, and I started to wonder, why was this happening and what were the critical things that were going on that were making me feel lonely? I wanted to share some of those with you guys today. The first thing that I would say is that, relationships and friendships for women tend to shift faster. They tend to shift at a quicker rate, especially if you've been in a hard driving career, especially if you've been, managing, your friends and your kids, and maybe even managing your young children and your parents, maybe caregiving on both sides of the coin. Once those friendships break, or once that tie, that corporate connection, that shared mission and vision breaks, the friendships can fade quickly. And if you're not intentional about them, if you're not a driving force behind them, if you're not the outreach person, you could find yourself in a lonely place unless you create new social anchors for yourself, new places that you can go, new friends you can, engage with. So unless you create new social anchors, new social places where you can go, new places where you can extend your hand and say who you are and really search with intentionality new friendships and relationships. Hey, listen, if you want help building a thriving social retirement, grab the relationship tool. It's the download below. Click on that and take a look at it. See if it sparks some ideas for you. The second point I touched on a little bit, and it's about caregiving. Women are often, I won't say always, but I will say often caregivers. It's often part of who we are. It's often the fabric of what we have built our lives on, whether it's with your children or aging parents or aunts or uncles or somewhere in your community or even through nonprofit organizations. We often fill our retirement with even more caregiving, caring for grandchildren, caring for your children, caring for your neighbors, caring for your parents. And that can leave just a little sliver of time for you. A little sliver of time for you to figure out who you are and what you want to do. There's a way through this lovely, warm, large heart that you have that you can experience caregiving and the satisfaction that comes from that and the help and aid that you give to others, balanced with, this idea of giving yourself some time. Given your relationships that you want to either ignite or cultivate, giving them some time. Again, that's going to take the intentionality around all that you do. It's going to challenge you. It's going to stretch you. I talked yesterday with a group of women in our masterclass, and we spent a lot of time talking about relationships and connection. We spent a lot of time talking about how hard it is to be 60 years old and try something new, an Orange Theory, a golf, pickleball, tennis, painting, gardening, whatever it might be, how hard it is to put yourself out there with your name, with your hand stuck out and, potentially fail at doing some of these things. But in doing that, really, really trying to build connection and really ward off a lot of the loneliness. Speaking of loneliness, for those of you who followed Mark and I over the years, loneliness is really, really detrimental to your health. That's why it's so important to put the work in now. So the third point is recognize where you are on the loneliness scale. Studies show that being lonely, lonely in an extended period is as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That's how detrimental it is to your health. It raises risk of depression and memory decline and just overall, joyful energy that you should have at this time in your life. It's not just an emotional challenge, but it really truly becomes a physical challenge. So I'm kind of doing this as a public service announcement for all my lady friends out there who find themselves either alone in retirement or lonely in retirement, kind of looking around and saying, where's my squad? Where's my posse? What do I have? What can I do? You've got to put yourself in places where you find people who want to share energy, who want to share experiences, and who want to create, a better, more vibrant community like yourself. So think about it now and think about how can you fix it? What resources do you have at your fingertips? Are you living in a 55 and older community where the, clubhouse becomes the central nervous system for everything that happens in that community? And can you pick and choose some areas where you can meet new people? Or are you living in just a village? Are you living in a small town or a city where you can find outreach and schedule social time, even if it's a cup of coffee with, Jane, and then it's, lunch with Margaret, and then, the next night you've got, dinner and cards with a group of friends. Even if you say to yourself, these things don't sound exciting to me, sometimes it's not what you're doing in the immediate next step, but it's the steps after that. So what I mean by that is, I started playing golf at 58 years old with intention to, actually conquer this game. And I use the word game, not sport, because I do believe it's a game, not a sport. So really to try to conquer that game. Simultaneously, I met a magnificent group of ladies who do yoga on Saturdays together. They play cards on Wednesday nights together. They have real community where they support each other when one has a spouse or partner who's gotten sick, or they themselves have gotten sick, or something has happened in their lives with one of their children. This all started and initiated with a golf game. It all started with 4 ladies showing up on a schedule, being put together to play golf. But it ended with so many other tangents that were card games or dinners or lunches or attending funerals together. You can't beat the fact that community is important. You can't substitute that for nearly anything in your life. The caregiver in me wants to do everything I can for our children at this stage of the game and be an emotional support house for them. It wants to do everything I can for our 2 grandsons and be the chief fun officer of our family. It wants to, help my pop when he's not feeling good. But that has to be balanced with, what am I doing to secure friendships? What am I doing for myself? I don't know if you have that internal barometer inside of you, but I've grown one since retirement where I know when I'm tapped out of service. And that just means I am tapped out. My files are all open with all of the people and things and causes that I have been doing for others. And I look at the pile of things that I've done for myself or things I've done to further my connections with women who are important to me. And if that pile's looking meek and the other pile is looking wild, I know that it's time for me to take a day to myself to regroup and to start reigniting boundaries. One of the things that I think is a creator of loneliness is a lack of boundaries. So I want you to think about that for a second because, if you don't have boundaries around what's important to you, we all can get pulled in a million directions. And while they may be meaningful to others, sitting back at the end of the day and asking if that was meaningful to you to be there. Was it meaningful to you to, pick up dry cleaning for, your kids, or to dog sit, or to, make dinners and bring them to them because they're working hard and working late? While that is meaningful and admirable, make sure that it's filling your bucket as well. Loneliness in retirement is more common than we think. Loneliness in retirement for men and for women is more common than we think. Most people don't want to talk about it. Most people, when you ask, how are you doing, especially in retirement, they say, I'm great and I'm busy. Dig a little deeper. Check on your friends. Check on your neighbors. Be the initiator. Be the one who picks up the phone. And if they don't call back, be the one that picks up the phone again. People need people, especially today, more than ever. I'm going to read some thoughts from our community, some questions that I got. The first one is, hi, I'm Mary. I'm 65 and I truly miss my work friends. How can I rebuild community from scratch without calling them when they're in the middle of their workday? And Mary, that is really difficult. A lot of those friends that you had that were situational friendships, and they were great friendships, a lot of those people might still be working and don't have the same amount of time you do. You have got to search and find time for them to rekindle those relationships. Maybe that's after hours, maybe it's weekends, maybe it's community cleanup or community volunteering projects. But then you also have to find new communities for yourself. Often in retirement, people move, right? You retire and everyone wants to move to Florida or the Carolinas or Arizona or Vermont or, all the different places where retirement communities pop up. But when you move, you have to have the courage to create new relationships. So you're not in it alone, because a lot of the other people that either moved there or who are starting retirement are in the same boat. I think if you extend yourself, you'll find that you'll have a lot of friends. Next question. This is Jane and I'm 68. I spend most of my time caring for my grandkids. How do I find space for myself without feeling guilty? It's interesting. I have a friend at our golf club. Her name is Lisa, and she and I talk a lot about this new era of grandparenting. This is not your grandparents' grandparenting life, right? We're not sitting on the porch rocking our chairs with a cup of tea. We're typically pretty hard driving business people who are busy trying to find our way in retirement. We are the first generation of women who are retiring with our own wealth. And with that comes a lot of avenues of things that we can do. That doesn't mean the grandkids are any less important, but it does mean setting boundaries for yourself so that you're sure you're feeding your soul as well as feeding their little souls. So there's a way to do it. You just have to find the balance. The next question. Hey, I'm Barbara and I'm 70. I lived in the same town for years, but now I feel isolated. How can I break and get into a new routine? Routine is critical, Barbara. Mark and I talk about routine all the time. What I think is important about routine is consistency. So build a routine through trial and error that you can be consistent on. And in your routine, put some things in like stopped at the coffee shop Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. After yoga, I went and grabbed a juice with 3 of the ladies that were in the class with me. As you build your routine, build social time into your routine. One of the things we don't talk about is how to connect social time to things that you're doing that are really good for you, like health and wellness and exercise. The next question is from Amy. I'm 66 and my husband passed away. I'm sorry to hear that, Amy. I feel like my social circle disappeared overnight. How can I start over? Well, there's a lot of groups. There's a lot of singles groups. There's a lot of trips for singles. There's a lot of volunteering for singles. There's a lot of solo travel that happens. There's certainly support groups for, grieving partners. And then I would really sit back and take a look at your friends and ask yourself, who knows me and who knows how I'm feeling right now? And make yourself vulnerable and get out and go do things with them. Try new things. Surprise yourself and surprise them. Might be the best way to reconnect with old friendships and start new ones.